Well, I wanted to do a program in English, which I haven't done for quite a while. It seems I do the daily Spanish one, and I feel a little freer sometimes doing the Spanish short program that I do Monday through Friday, 13 minutes, because it's basically for Peru, even though it's a very conservative radio station from Italy that runs it. But so, and I kind of want to avoid getting too political in my commentaries, even though I feel I have to say the truth as I see it when appropriate. I noticed that on YouTube, I have one more follower, 24, so it's a little group. Viewing time has gone down, but um, in English, I wanted to perhaps start speaking about spirituality, speaking about coping with the pandemic and coping with life. And I wasn't really that inspired this morning, even though I've got my house in order. I've done my cleaning 4 times this week. I divided up my complete cleaning into four. And, so I feel pretty good, but nevertheless, life is full of difficulties and misunderstandings and coping with many, many things. And if we persevere, I have found that we tend to have success, little setbacks that occur in life, I have found get resolved. And then other things come to a head, certain relationships, for example, that are problematic and have been problematic, and where things have not been aired out or cleared up, or maybe can't be very long term, including family relationships, that the foundation is very bad. Dysfunctional family, bad early childhood experiences may remain with you your whole life. And some, get the brunt of it one way, and some of it get the brunt of it the other way. I get the brunt of it as the oldest sibling, blamed for many things in this dysfunctional family with a very domineering father, very angry, vituperative, sort of insulting, anxious man, not a bad man, just full of anxieties and conflicts from his own father, who was a very tough, domineering guy, cold. And so this is where you get this original sin idea. It's passed on from grandfather to father to eldest son more than the others. And then the others complain about their life and themselves and the family. And I sometimes seem to be a good focus of anger, even after over 50 years. So that sometimes now in this pandemic, things come to the surface uh, that are then ventilated, aired out, and I think clarity is better than obscurity or nebulousness or confusion or lack of clarity. Um, I wanted to talk about a couple of things. One would be the reading in the Mass today for Catholics. It's very, very interesting. I want to get to that in a second, but I thought that if I began speaking, thoughts would come and justify this YouTube session in English, like I said. And in fact, I had taken some notes for a meeting that I saw the other day, and I don't want to get too specific on the Zoom meeting that was taking place with some great, um, experts or very famous people like E.J. Dion and Massimo Fagioli and the Bishop of, I think, San Diego. Very good bishop, very impressive, incredible educational credentials. And another panelist who is associated with a movement that, and here I'm going to mention some political thing just briefly, I think, that I was associated, that I attended meetings of. That's a movement. It's called, actually, I'll mention the name of the movement, Focolare. It's an Italian movement founded after World War II by Chiara Lubich, all about unity, 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 unity. Jesus alone on the cross, a very simple spirituality. I attended these meetings not because they were my favorite group. My favorite community is the community of Sant'Egidio, with whom I participated for several years, quite actively, and now I follow, I think quite closely, more or less. But in the absence of this community in South Florida, I would attend Focolare meetings, and then finally, a couple of years ago, I attended a meeting, an important meeting in Vero Beach, 100 miles from my house. So I drove 100 miles. There was food and you paid, and a retreat or some sort of meeting with even people from Italy. And in this simple group of people, I started speaking to some of the leader people, leaders there, and I heard things such as Trump is anointed by God, or Trump has been raised by God for these present times. I was shocked. I'm not going to get too much into it. But a movement centered on unity, to speak like that of a person that to me is the most divisive being we've ever had. All these presidents are now getting their shots. They're all together. They all went to the inauguration. The lone wolf, and really wolf, that didn't participate is this man who has these legions of people fanatically devoted to him. And it's a great divide in this country. And no one got to really ask questions in this Zoom meeting. I think they summarized two questions, or conflated the questions of two individuals who weren't named or seen or anything. My own question was the first one when I saw this lady associated with this movement, a lawyer, professor. And I was going to ask how, because the topic of the Zoom meeting was how to deal with Biden, or how should Biden be looked at by Catholics. The Catholic bishops have criticized Biden. They criticized Obama. They criticized, of course, Clinton. But of course, Trump, little, not even slaps on the wrist. Totally not what the Pope is about. We're just celebrating the Pope's 8th anniversary as Pope. He's gone to Iraq, um, which would be like Jonah going to Nineveh, in the same region, basically. Jonah, a Hebrew prophet, is told by Yahweh, go to Nineveh to preach conversion to these Ninevites, the arch enemies of Israel, the capital of Assyria. And Jonah hauls in the opposite direction and has to be, called back. And finally, there's a happy ending, which historically is, unheard of. But everyone put on sackcloth and ashes, including the animals. So to make the point, and the last little sort of backward hand slap is, these are people that don't know their right from their left. And so you have an autocritical, a self-critical book in the Hebrew Bible, very typical of the Jews in the Bible, especially, and in general, probably. Self-criticism. Everyone in this story of Jonah is, we say in Spanish, even in English, simpático, nice, likable. The only guy that's unlikable is the Hebrew prophet. The sailors pray, and the animals wear their little sackcloth, and the king of Nineveh and the whole people convert and all this, repent of their evils and all this. And the only guy that looks bad there and is concerned about the shade of this, whatever this gourd tree is or whatever, kikayon, I guess in Hebrew, there's an editorial house that has that name. He's a petty, petty guy who doesn't want Yahweh's love to include the enemies, prefiguring Jesus. Love your enemies. How many people practice that, especially people that want to build walls and say that Mexican immigrants are rapists, and I assume maybe some good people in there. My church is all immigrants from Central America and Mexico. I lived in Mexico. I hear that kind of stuff, and it's the devil speaking to me. I hear the devil speaking when I hear that. But, in this irenic, this sort of peaceful meeting, and here I'm getting to sort of say what I would have said had I been in this panel discussion. Maybe what I have to say is it wasn't important enough or good enough. But I detected a note of Irenism, which means a false peace. Irene means peace in Greek. A false peace where, and then one of the expressions that was indeed used, because I mean, E.J. Dionne and other people like that are sharp, is the Solomonic solution, which to me is a classic thing that I have encountered with many of my Christian friends, and this is why I wanted to speak today a little bit. In other words, two women go to Solomon with a baby that they both claim is hers. Obviously false. One of them is mistaken. I mean, there's no democratic rule that says everyone is right or everyone is wrong or every problem is a half and half thing. And there's no more graphic description of it than the story in Kings about Solomon. So he says wisely, let's split the baby in half. Um, and of course, that's a way of catalyzing or triggering the sentiments of the real mother. And he discovers who the real mother is because the real mother is not willing to have her baby cut in half. Um, and so, whereas the non-mother doesn't care. So I hear a lot that there's good people on both sides, and every problem is gray and it's still under discussion. All these kinds of things to me are oftentimes very, very, very false. And again, I think that the analogy with medicine, a good diagnosis is necessary in order to have a prospect of cure, or at least preparation for the aftermath or consequences of a disease. Denial of the disease is no solution. It's denial. And so the assault on truth, I think, is one of the greatest uh, horrible things that has been launched full blown. Start with Trump won the election, really, or get people angry enough to assault the Capitol. if you and I, like I said, I think one of my programs, I tried to channel surf to check what Fox News was doing, and they were covering the invasion of the Central Americans who were trying to get into Mexico from the Guatemala border. Had a long way to go, and they're not going to come to assault the capital or our institutions. They're going to come to try to get work in the fields, etc. And they wouldn't be coming unless people were hiring them. You don't see hordes of Mexicans homeless under bridges. They don't come here for that. They come here to work. So anyway, but this is the kind of manipulation that, in my humble way, these little videos, 24 subscribers, maybe more viewers off and on, or whatever, I do it as a sense almost of duty, sharing in English. I repeat what I was asked to do in Spanish. I could get fired from that little radio station any day. Um, they need me, I suppose, my 13 minutes. Um, I don't get paid for it, but fired anyway. I had a job one time that as an assistant to the RCIA, the Christian Education for Initiation into the Church. I was assistant to a woman who suggested that they pay me, and they wound up paying me like $25 a month, which almost didn't, I don't think it covered my driving from Key Biscayne to Coral Gables to Little Flower Church. So it was a symbolic token payment, $25 a month. It was more problems for me filling my taxes over that than the $25 back in 1987. And this new pastor comes into the parish. I'm not going to mention his name, but he left in with an ill smell, not an odor of sanctity when he left that church. Canon lawyer, very stickler for the budget and all that kind of stuff. I can understand that, but this is the tact this man showed toward a volunteer who went every Saturday for 2 or 3 hours to help teach, the rites of Christian initiation for adults, RCIA. And instead of saying, a little letter to me, Emilio, I'm sorry, our budget now cannot even afford to pay you $25 a month, so we can't pay you. Are you willing to stay on without the $25 a month, which I was doing before anyway, was her suggestion, not mine. The woman in charge. Or, Emilio, we have to remove you from our payroll. You can no longer be even a part-time employee because of the budget. That would have been okay. Instead, this man and his priest, a priest with a degree in canon law, his tact or lack thereof resulted in a letter to me, which even a non-important letter is going to get you upset. This is to inform you are immediately dismissed or terminated as as of the effective date of this letter or something. Wow, no thanks, no nothing. So this is the corporate vicious mentality of doing things without thinking. Even if you are a priest with a canon law degree, you don't not only not see the whole picture, you don't even see enough of the picture to be minimally human, much less Christian. So I want to have reflections. I want to do a little series, God willing, as things proceed. And again, discernment is one of the important topics that I like to cultivate. And when I was listening to the Zoom meeting, this topic of discernment came up, and I was thinking of the whole drama in the Gospel of John is Jesus of God or of the devil? If you follow the so-called Pharisee manual, he violates Sabbath, he does other things that are contrary to our legal interpretation, he must be an evildoer. And in fact, today, the alternative reading for the precisely, see, this is all the unconscious doing stuff. The rite of Christian initiation meeting for this Sunday in the Catholic Church is actually John 9, the healing of the blind man. And this is a man blind from birth, unheard of, to be cured and regain his sight. And he's not even sure who Jesus is, but he says Jesus is of God. And he wants to meet Jesus and ends up meeting Jesus and believing in Jesus. But everyone else, including his parents, say no, or we don't either want to get involved because they don't want to be excommunicated from the synagogue, or we know God spoke to Moses, but we don't know. And so Jesus tells the Pharisees that he came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see might become blind. This is the famous reversal, related to what I'm going to talk about in a second, which is this being lifted up thing that's going to be in the gospel. A hard rock saying of Jesus, whoever humbles himself will be exalted, and whoever exalts himself will be humbled. This is, to me, about the most historical saying of Jesus, which he acted and lived out. So that, just to finish with this little gospel, which is not the one I want to talk about a little bit, some of the Pharisees who were with him heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you are saying we see, so your sin remains." So that discernment, and in this case, you're dealing with a 1200-year history of Moses and the Torah, and then all the hard-won Jewish fidelity to the covenant in the conversion that took place during the Babylonian exile, where Judaism emerges indestructible. And I respect and applaud that. I respect the existence of the Jews today and following their religion in conscience without the need to convert them. Bernard, as I've mentioned before, St. Bernard of Clairvaux, I think said the conversion of the Jews is in God's hands. And Pope Benedict echoed that. And of course, Paul in Romans, I have mentioned before, I remember, Paul has revealed a mystery that the partial hardening of the Jews will take place until the full number of the Gentiles comes in, and then all Israel will be saved. And I know some scholars, I think Fitzmyer, say that salvation presupposes conversion to Christianity, but I'm not going to say that. I don't know. I think there's a line in Matthew, "You will not see me again till you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord," meaning perhaps that when Jesus returns in the parousia, this second coming, which is not anticipated in the Hebrew Bible, that the Messiah comes twice or has to come twice. A Jewish woman asked me that. I mentioned that before. And I said, it doesn't say it in your Bible. In ours, he comes twice. Didn't finish the job the first time, or more or less. But in Matthew, when the people acclaim, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord," it could be that when Jesus appears the second time, everyone will recognize who he is. I still remember Rabbi Yeats Greenberg story that when Jesus comes again, or comes, there will be a press conference and they'll ask him, Messiah, is this the first time or the second time you've come? And the Messiah will answer, on orders of my Father, no comment. So I think that's the kind of kenotic or self-emptying, inclusive attitude we have to have, putting ourselves in the other's place, and realizing that unity is much more important and reconciliation is much more important than a doctrinal checklist that we concoct and adhere to conveniently, leaving out some of the stuff we don't want to think about. If you have a list that says abortion is the issue and everything else is nothing, you've made a little list for yourself that's very convenient for you. But it is, I think, a perversion of God's complete will. And I am getting a little inspired again because I've returned to reading N.T. Wright that I've mentioned before. I read The Resurrection of the Son of God, a tremendous book. Now I'm reading the two massive volumes on Paul, and he's all about Messiah and Spirit. But he begins, the book begins with praise from all kinds of scholars, including a man that I've mentioned, done a lot of videos, so I don't expect people to remember all the stuff I've mentioned. But Daniel Boyarin, who is a Berkeley Talmudic scholar, I think he won't mind my saying something I learned publicly because I'm not a friend of his. I don't know him. I've read his books, or his stuff anyway, including the Jewish Gospels, which I believe is a tremendous short book on Jesus, with the best you could read, page for, pound for pound or ounce for ounce. He's gay, and he's kind of a dissident Jew, kind of a dissident to rabbinic Judaism, and the rules and all that. But he's a brilliant guy that has come up with his own views on so many things. I discovered him with a Harvard Theological Review article called The Gospel of the Memra, M-E-M-R-A, the Gospel of the Memra, which is the Aramaic word for word. And so Jesus the Word, this guy Boyarin is very big on the pluralism that existed in Judaism prior to the rabbis taking over, and then prohibiting this second power in the heavens or something next to God. The 13 principles of Maimonides, no one is like God. God doesn't have a son or anything like that. But the kind of things that Boyarin can encompass within his view of Judaism, very learned, is very provocative and very, very, very interesting. So these are sort of some ruminations on various of these things that I've been thinking about. But as I continue to read N.T. Wright, it'll take me quite a while to go through. I think it's probably close to 2,000 pages from 2013, by the way. So it's a relatively recent book. It's his magnum opus, his last great work. I should be inspired to say more stuff in English. We're almost at half an hour. I don't want to take too long, but I did want to talk about the readings of the Mass briefly, especially because a priest friend of mine from England said he used my stuff on being lifted up. This is on my website. So if you went to my website, Chavez Bible Explainer, you Google that, you should be able to get it. And then you go to short notes on biblical topics. I had to upload this because I had it only in the John section, but in the short notes on biblical topics, I added this little paper, that little, note sheet that I typed up, the serpent on the ensign in Numbers and John's Gospel. So, Moses is told in the book of Numbers, and this is a reading for, actually, it's a reading for Sunday. The blind man is for the RCIA alternative reading, but the reading for the normal Mass on Sunday, fourth Sunday of Lent, is from John 3, the encounter with Nicodemus. But what happens in Numbers 21 is that after the people get bitten with snakes, Moses is told to make bronze serpents, which I think was known as Nashucha, or something like that. Nahash would be serpent, but it actually had a name and was destroyed by Hezekiah. I remember reading that in a great, great book, Who Wrote the Bible? Richard Elliott Friedman, Jewish guy. Who Wrote the Bible? Best book you can read on the Old Testament if you want to read just one little book, or 200 pages or so. Nehushtan, I think, was the name of this bronze serpent that for some reason, as a cult object, Hezekiah decided, the king, the great reformer King Hezekiah, David, Hezekiah, Josiah being the three great sort of kings of Israel. It did exist, but the ensign is a pole suitable for placing a cloth on it. So it can be a flag or a standard. The word in Hebrew is nes. It appears in Isaiah, lift up a standard for the peoples, etc. But the important thing is that in the Gospel of John, Jesus says, just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert to heal the people, a serpent being a symbol of healing, I'm not sure why exactly, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. And as I mentioned before, I'll repeat, being lifted up in Aramaic specifically is synonymous with exaltation or crucifixion and crucifixion. The great Aramaic scholar, English Aramaic scholar Matthew Black, in an Aramaic approach to the Gospels, discusses John 12, 32. When I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all to myself. And this is a pun that works especially well in Aramaic. The verb there, I think, would be zakaf. And it's synonymous with being raised up in honor or crucified, which is also a parody of being a king. Crucifixion was a parody of being a king. There's a great article by Joel Marcus, another Jewish New Testament scholar, that I have used. He talks a lot about what crucifixion really entailed. It was a form of being enthroned as a false kingly pretender. And some of these crucified people actually, with great dignity, or at least Jesus did, suffered this parody, this being laughed at. And in fact, what's interesting too is, and I've said this before, but in Ezra, the book of Ezra, chapter 6, verse 11, it's actually in Aramaic, not in Hebrew. And there you have the use of this verb for the impalement of someone who violates, I forget what, probably the Torah or one of these Ezra and Nehemiah, post-exilic reform type things that I'm not going to get into right now. But they use the verb in Aramaic in the book of Ezra. Whoever doesn't follow the edict, I suppose, of Cyrus, of all things, Cyrus. We're going to talk about Cyrus in a second. We have a parallel in the Joseph story where, there's the pun or the play on words. They're going to lift up your head. Pharaoh's going to lift up your head, and this servant thinks Pharaoh is going to promote him or something. And in this case, lift up your head is synonymous with being impaled, again, hung on a pole, which is very common. Crucifixion wasn't the only way to die that way. You had impalement, being hung on a pole. And I think Qumran in the Dead Sea Scrolls talks more about that than actual crucifixion. But I'm not gonna get into that. But the interesting thing is that the humbling yourself to death on a cross, as Paul says in Philippians, is what results in, therefore God so glorified him, and his name above every other name, so every knee shall bend, etc. Whoever humbles himself will be exalted. The first shall be last, the last shall be first. So I think we can take that to be hard rock Christ's philosophy and even words. And so we have that lesson about humility and hope. And I now wanted to get into the readings which are related to this, sort of as maybe even a prelude to a little series like I tried to do with Introduction to Christian Doctrine. I did about, I think, 7 or 8 such sessions. But the book of Chronicles, from which the first reading in today's Mass is taken, the very end of the book of Chronicles, chapter 36, second book of Chronicles. The book of Chronicles is a recapitulation of the history of Israel to the time of the exile and then the immediate after exile, or decree of Cyrus allowing return to the land. Would be like a jubilee return, reclaiming your land. And then rebuilding the temple, for which he was known. The Cyrus cylinder is one of these archaeological objects that actually documents how Cyrus favored the happiness of his subjects by going back to the land, opposite of the Babylonian policy of deportation. So Cyrus wants everybody back and working and happy and paying their taxes. He's going to rule through the priests. And he actually gave subsidies for the rebuilding of many temples, probably destroyed by the Babylonians or something. Certainly the Jewish one was. And what's very interesting about this reading in Numbers is that, first of all, it's the end of the Hebrew Bible. So that the last book of the Jewish canon is the book of Chronicles. And the very last words in the book of Chronicles, I'm going to have to try to get them to be seen. The order is very important. Sometimes they say, let him go up and may his God be with him. That's inverse order. The right order, the ESV, English Standard Version, has the right order. May the Lord his God be with him. Let him go up. So the very last words of the book of Chronicles. Let him go up. Ya'al. The first word of the book of Chronicles, first book of Chronicles, is Adam. So that's why the book of Chronicles is a recapitulation of everything from Adam to the end of the exile, and then the Aliyah, the going up, what the Jews now say when they return to Israel to live. Or the songs of ascent are the Shirim Aliyot, the songs of going up, the goings up. You always go up to Mount Zion, you always go down into Egypt. So that this reading is very, very interesting. Of course, the going up is related to, as Moses lifted up the serpent, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. After Jesus' exile comes his exodus. And that's what he's talking about with Moses and Elijah in the Lucan version of the Transfiguration. They were talking about his exodus that he was about to fulfill in Jerusalem. His exodus being, it's used in the Book of Wisdom in Greek as synonymous of death. We thought the exodus of the just man was an ignominy or something. Well, but in Jesus' case, it's his death on the cross and then his ascension, his going up. So it's very, very interesting to look at it that way. But I wanted to just touch base without taking too long. The account here in Chronicles is heartrending and very interesting. So everyone is multiplying their sins. The Lord, the God of their fathers, persistently sent. I think they use one of these Hebrew verbs for, awakening at dawn, etc. At least he sent them time and again. His messengers, or his servants, really. And because he had compassion on his people and his dwelling place. So this is a very priestly writing. Chronicles, Ezra, and Nehemiah is a priestly school type writing. Ezra was a Sadducite priest and scribe. But by this time you have a mixing with Deuteronomic ideas and descending the prophets time and again as a Jeremiah 7 thing and a Deuteronomic thing and the Deuteronomic history thing, and near the end of Kings, etc. They kept mocking the messengers of God, despising their words, until the wrath of the Lord rose against his people and there was no remedy. Therefore he brought against them the king of the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, the Neo-Babylonians, and he killed their young men with a sword and their virgins, no compassion, all the vessels of the house. He burned the house of the Lord and broke down the wall of Jerusalem and burned its palaces with fire and destroyed all its precious vessels. And he took into exile into Babylon all those who had escaped the sword. They became his servants until the establishment of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land would enjoy or pay, the verb ratzah, restore, make amends, its Sabbaths. So this priestly guy is looking at it as a sort of like 70 years of Sabbaths that had not been fulfilled or complied with. The land had not enjoyed its Sabbath, so now the people had to pay the land its Sabbaths. Double meaning verb, double duty. All the days that it lay desolate. This is the Shema word. There's another one closely related, the Shoah word in Zephaniah. All the days that it lay desolate, it kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. So you see, this is a theological view of the whole thing. It has to do with the very first hallmark of a Jew, which is Sabbath keeping. The Lord rested in Genesis 1, sanctifying the Sabbath. In the two Ten Commandment lists in Exodus and Deuteronomy, the longest time verses, the more space is devoted to the Sabbath. Only honor your father and mother has a price which to prolong your days in the land, but the most elaborate dealing of Sabbath is in Exodus and Deuteronomy. The Lord sanctified, or you were slaves in Egypt, so you have to enjoy a Sabbath, and your female slave and your male slave and everybody else has to enjoy the Sabbath rest, unusually in the ancient world. And then he makes rise, stirs up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, to proclaim that he has all the kingdoms of the earth, just like Jesus was offered. He has charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. And so in this reading, and again, Chronicles is like the I don't want to say sanitized in a bad way. It's the theologically elaborated and redeemed, if you will, Deuteronomic history. The history of failure, which comes after Torah, in Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. Those 4 books. It's called the Deuteronomic history. History of failure. Begins with conquest with Joshua and ends with exile at the end of Kings, where everybody, says the text, goes back to Egypt. Not even Babylon. Yeah, they talk about Babylon, but in that passage in 2 Kings 25, verse 26, Richard Elliott Friedman taught me this through his books and articles. Some editor has put they all went back to Egypt, which is the last curse in Deuteronomy 28. You will go back to Egypt in ships. That way that I said, never again go back to Egypt. But I will take you back in ships, and you will try to sell yourselves as male and female servants, and no one will buy. Worse off than in the beginning, before step 1. So you undo the whole plan of redemption by sinning. And now in Chronicles, the words of the days, I think it's called in Hebrew, this book, you have a redemption where this bad ending at the end of Kings, with a little door ajar, letting some light in, because I think they let the king eat at the table of the emperor, etc., the deposed king of Judah. But the point being that you end on a happy note, but very much like the Torah. So the end of the Jewish Bible Chronicles is an ending on a happy note, but an incomplete ending. because even though they go back, not everybody, Jews stay in Babylon till the Talmud time and later, until yesterday, with all these things going on over there. But at least the decree is issued, let everyone go back, or who is among his people, who may the Lord his God be with him, let him go up to rebuild this temple, which they will rebuild, only to have it destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. So that this is the ending of the Jewish Bible, which is a non-ending, because this is not the definitive ending. They're going to build the temple, have the temple destroyed, be dispersed, banned from Jerusalem in the year 135 AD. And then now the hope of Jews is to, many Jews, to go back to Israel, Eretz Yisrael, doing the Aliyah, the going up, the uh, immigration, if you will, immigration, return, whatever. And so the end book of the Bible parallels the end book of the Torah, Deuteronomy, where they're still waiting to enter the land. Moses has died, and they're waiting for a prophet, I think, like Moses had predicted in Deuteronomy 18. So far, I would translate, so far, not yet, not never again. I don't like that translation. Not yet has a prophet like Moses arisen in Israel who spoke to God face to face, which of course Acts 33 identifies as Jesus. It's Acts 3, rather, verse, I think, 22. Let me double check. Acts 3, verse 22 and 23 identify this prophet like Moses awaited at the end with Jesus. But you have here the end of the Jewish canon. Jesus himself mentions the first death, which is Abel, and then the last death, which is of the priest Zechariah, which takes place in 2nd Chronicles. He does this in Matthew 23 and I think Luke 11, when he says all the innocent blood will be upon this generation, etc. All the innocent blood spilled in the Bible. So that this would be, yes, Luke 11, Matthew 23. So in any case, I suppose in summary, I'm trying to get into more reflective, spiritual types of considerations in these videos that I want to continue doing in English. Not so as not to leave out anybody that might be interested that doesn't understand the Spanish, which is normal. And I thought that this reading today, especially with the encouragement I received from this English priest friend of mine, that he used my little notes on the lifting up. Actually, in my website, not only do I have this one, but I also have another one called More on the Verb to Lift Up in Hebrew and Greek. So that we can probably talk about this at some other occasion. But I thought the important thing would be the humility in the hopes of victory. N.T. Wright likes to refer a lot to the victory of God or the victory of Christ. I think today, as we struggle with the pandemic, we should be hopeful for victory if we heed what the prophets are saying. If we go after blind prophets that lead into blind alleys, I don't think they're listening to my videos, but maybe they are. Then we're lost, or at least a good portion is lost. So we have to discern, is this from God or from the devil? if it's false and hateful and arrogant and lying and changing from one day to the other and all about me, me, and if you're loyal to me, you're fine, I pardon you. If you're not loyal to me, you're out and I fire you time and again. If you can't discern that, it's like saying Jesus expels demons by the finger of Beelzebub. You're following a little manual of somebody stuck in your head. You don't think much, and that's where we are. We're in a very bad spot, but I think there's hope in this new beginning that we have now. We're tackling the virus, we're tackling many other things, and the language itself. I think Marshall McLaughlin said the medium is the message. I take that to also mean how you say things and how you approach the treatment of things, either thoughtfully or flippantly, arrogantly. That itself says a lot about your message. There's no message that's quick and easy and flippant, but rather we have to be more like monks who saved civilization after the Dark Ages or during the Dark Ages. With those thoughts, I terminate my brief or not so brief session today.